I'm Derek Wilson, 21 years old now, but my life changed forever at 17 when my stepbrother Tyler framed me for stealing my mom's expensive bracelet. My stepdad Warren helped him create false evidence, and my mother Rebecca chose to believe them over me. I was disowned and thrown out with nothing but the clothes on my back. 4 years later, we all reunited at my grandmother Eleanor's 100th birthday party, where she revealed a shocking truth that left my family stunned. Now they're facing serious legal consequences and begging me to drop the charges. If you're watching this, let me know where you're viewing from and hit that subscribe button to hear how justice finally found its way to me. Life wasn't always this complicated. Until I was 6, it was just me, my mom Rebecca, and my dad living in a small but happy home in suburban Michigan. Then Dad died suddenly from a heart attack, leaving Mom to raise me alone. She worked 2 jobs, administrative assistant during the day and waitressing several nights a week, just to keep a roof over our heads. Despite her exhaustion, she always made time to help with my homework and attend my school events. We were a team. Everything changed when I was 11. Mom met Warren at the insurance company where she worked. He was a regional manager, recently divorced with a 14-year-old son named Tyler. Their romance moved quickly, too quickly, looking back. Within 8 months they were married, and we moved into Warren's spacious 2-story house in the nicer part of town. "This is our fresh start, Derek," Mom told me, her eyes bright with hope as we unpacked our belongings. "You'll have a bigger room, a yard, and a brother." I tried to share her optimism. Having grown up as an only child, the idea of having a brother seemed exciting at first. Tyler seemed okay during our initial meetings, quiet but not unfriendly. We even played video games together a few times before the wedding. I remember thinking maybe this would work out. That honeymoon period lasted about 3 months. The first sign something was off came when my favorite watch disappeared. It wasn't expensive, just a Spider-Man watch my dad had given me for my 6th birthday. When I mentioned it was missing, Tyler suggested I must have lost it at school. A week later, I found it buried at the bottom of his desk drawer when I was looking for a pencil sharpener. "Oh yeah," he said casually when confronted. "I found it in the bathroom and forgot to give it back." Small items continued to go missing: money from my wallet, a portable game console, a signed baseball card. Each time, Tyler had an explanation that sounded just plausible enough that questioning it made me look paranoid. When I tried talking to Warren about it, his response was always the same. "Boys will be boys. You need to learn to share, Derek. Tyler's adjusting to having you around too." Mom attempted to mediate these conflicts, but Warren would subtly undermine her efforts. "Rebecca, you're babying him. Derek needs to toughen up a little." She'd give me an apologetic look but rarely contradicted Warren. I learned to keep my belongings locked in my school locker or hidden in spots Tyler wouldn't think to look. The one person who seemed to see through Tyler was Warren's mother, my grandmother Eleanor. She lived about an hour away in a beautiful old Victorian house that had been in the family for generations. When we visited on holidays, I noticed how her eyes followed Tyler with a quiet suspicion. Once, after he'd made a particularly mean comment disguised as a joke, she pulled me aside. "Some people wear masks, Derek," she said softly. "Always trust what you see, not what you're told to see." I didn't fully understand what she meant then, but those words would echo in my mind years later. As we entered high school, our paths diverged further. I maintained straight A's, joined the debate team, and started working part-time at the local grocery store at 16 to save for college. Tyler, meanwhile, fell in with a crowd that was known for partying. His grades slipped, and he was caught with alcohol on school grounds twice. Yet somehow, Warren always managed to minimize these incidents. "He's just finding himself," Warren would tell my mom. "His teachers don't understand his learning style." The same day I proudly showed Mom my acceptance letter to a weekend honors program, Tyler got suspended for skipping class. Somehow, the dinner conversation that night focused entirely on how the school system was failing Tyler rather than celebrating my achievement. The bracelet that would eventually tear our family apart was a family heirloom, a diamond and sapphire piece that had belonged to Eleanor's mother. Worth about $25,000, it was Eleanor's gift to my mother on her wedding day to Warren. "This represents the joining of our families," Eleanor had said, watching carefully as my mother slipped it on with tears in her eyes. "Families should always protect and cherish each other." The irony of those words still stings. In the weeks before the incident, I noticed Tyler seemed increasingly anxious. He was taking more phone calls in private and arguing with someone about money. I didn't pay much attention. His drama was constant, and I'd learned to keep my distance. I was focused on my senior year college applications and increasing my work hours to save more money. Little did I know that his problems were about to become mine in the worst possible way. The weekend everything changed started like any other. Mom and Warren were planning a weekend getaway to celebrate their anniversary, leaving Friday after work and returning Sunday evening. Tyler was explicitly forbidden from using Warren's car while they were gone, having recently had his driving privileges suspended after getting a speeding ticket. "I mean it, Tyler," Warren said sternly at breakfast that Friday. "The car stays in the garage. Derek will be working most of the weekend anyway, so you'll need to order food or walk to your friends' houses if you want to go out." Tyler nodded sullenly. "Whatever." I had back-to-back shifts at the grocery store that weekend, so I planned to be home only to sleep. As I left for my Friday afternoon shift, I saw Tyler texting rapidly, a frustrated expression on his face. What I didn't know then, but would discover much later, was that Tyler had already made plans to attend a major party at his friend Jack's house that Saturday night. And despite his promise, he waited until I left for work, then took Warren's BMW from the garage. According to what was later revealed, Tyler spent that night drinking heavily at the party. Around 2 in the morning, he attempted to drive back home, lost control on a curve, and crashed into a roadside ditch. The car suffered significant damage to the front end and passenger side. Panicking, Tyler called his friend Jack, who helped him push the car to Jack's family's unused garage where his parents wouldn't notice it. The next morning, Tyler called a mechanic he knew who occasionally did under-the-table repairs. The estimate was devastating, $7,500 to fix the damage before his parents returned on Sunday. The mechanic demanded payment upfront, knowing Tyler's reputation for avoiding bills. Tyler's financial situation was dire. His credit card was already maxed out from buying designer clothes and electronics. Warren had cut his allowance after the last school suspension. He was desperate. I came home Saturday afternoon between shifts to change clothes and grab a quick meal. As I passed Tyler's room, I overheard him on the phone, his voice tense. "I need to find $7,000 by tomorrow afternoon, man. If my dad sees the car, he'll kill me. I'm not exaggerating. No, I already owe you from last time. There has to be something I can sell quickly." I thought little of it. Tyler was always in some kind of financial trouble, usually resolved by Warren eventually bailing him out despite threats that, "This is the last time." That evening, when I returned from my dinner break, the family was home for a rare meal together. Mom was wearing the sapphire bracelet, as she often did for special occasions. I noticed Tyler staring at it throughout dinner, an odd, calculating look in his eyes that made me uncomfortable. The next morning, Sunday, I woke early for my shift. As I passed my mother's room, I saw Tyler quietly closing her door. He jumped when he saw me. "Just borrowing some cologne from the bathroom," he said quickly, though Warren's cologne was kept in their ensuite bathroom, not on Mom's jewelry vanity. I was running late and didn't have time to question him. That decision would haunt me for years. When I returned from work that afternoon, the house was in chaos. Mom was frantically searching through her jewelry box, drawers pulled out, contents scattered across the bed. "The bracelet is gone," she said, her voice breaking. "I put it back in my jewelry box last night, and now it's gone." A household-wide search commenced. Couch cushions were overturned, drawers emptied, even the garbage checked. Throughout this, Tyler maintained a concerned expression, helping search while occasionally making comments like, "When was the last time Derek was in your room, Mom?" These subtle hints continued through the evening. Tyler mentioned to Warren that he'd seen Derek checking his online bank account with a worried look the previous week. Warren began asking pointed questions about my finances and whether I was having money troubles. "You know you can tell us if you need help, son," he said, his tone suggesting he already believed I'd done something wrong. "My finances are fine," I replied, increasingly uneasy about the direction of his questions. The next day after school, when I returned to my room, something felt off. Items on my desk had been shifted slightly. I didn't think much of it until Warren conducted what he called a routine cleaning of our rooms that evening, something he'd never done before, and mysteriously found Mom's empty jewelry box under my bed. "Care to explain this, Derek?" he asked, holding the box like evidence in a trial. My genuine shock must have been evident. "I have no idea how that got there. I didn't take it." The situation worsened the following day. As I reached into my jacket pocket for my wallet before work, my fingers closed around an unfamiliar piece of paper. I pulled out a receipt from a pawn shop across town for $23,000. The date matched the day the bracelet disappeared, but I had been at work all day. Before I could process what was happening, Warren entered my room without knocking. "Looking for something?" he asked, his eyes falling to the receipt in my hand. "Hand that over." I was too confused to resist. He took the receipt, studied it with an expression of grim satisfaction, and left without another word. I stood frozen, my mind racing to understand what was happening. That night, I overheard Tyler and Warren talking in low voices in the den. "We need to handle this carefully," Warren was saying. "Rebecca will be devastated." "I know," Tyler replied, his voice carrying just the right amount of concern. "I never thought Derek would do something like this. Maybe he's jealous of our family or something." I felt sick, suddenly understanding what was happening. They were framing me for the theft. But why? And how could I prove my innocence? The next evening, Warren called a family meeting in the living room. My mother sat perched on the edge of the sofa, eyes red from crying. Tyler slouched in an armchair, watching me with an expression of practiced concern. Warren remained standing, assuming the role of judge and jury. "Derek, we need to discuss something serious," Warren began, his voice stern but controlled. "Rebecca's bracelet has gone missing, as you know." I nodded, already feeling a knot forming in my stomach. "During cleaning, we found the empty jewelry box under your bed," he continued. "And then there's this." He held up the pawn shop receipt. "This was found in your jacket pocket. It's dated last Sunday, for $23,000. The same day the bracelet disappeared." My mother gasped, bringing her hand to her mouth. "Derek, please tell me this isn't true." "It's not," I protested, standing up. "I was at work all day Sunday. Check with my manager. I never went to any pawn shop." Warren shook his head. "Your shift ended at 3. The receipt is time-stamped at 4:15. You had plenty of time." "I didn't take it. Someone is setting me up." I looked directly at Tyler, whose expression remained perfectly calibrated between shock and disappointment. "I hate to even think this," Tyler said, his voice carefully modulated to sound pained. "But Derek has been checking his bank account a lot lately. And I heard him talking about needing money for something big." This was a complete fabrication, but delivered with such conviction that even I almost questioned my memory. "That's a lie," I said, my voice rising with frustration. "I've been saving for college. I don't need to steal." Warren stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous tone. "Watch yourself, Derek. We have evidence. And frankly, your jealousy of Tyler has been obvious for years." "My jealousy?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "He's the one who's been stealing from me since day one." "See?" Warren turned to my mother. "This is exactly what I was talking about. Always blaming Tyler for everything." I looked desperately to my mother, who had always been my ally. "Mom, you know me. I would never steal from you. Ever. Think about it. Why would I hide the jewelry box under my own bed? That makes no sense. For a moment, I saw doubt flicker in her eyes. She had raised me for 12 years before Warren came into our lives. She knew my character. Maybe we should call the police, I suggested. Let them investigate properly. Check fingerprints on the box. Verify with the pawn shop. Warren immediately intervened. No police. We're handling this as a family. Besides, do you really want a theft charge on your record right before college applications? His quick rejection of proper investigation only confirmed my suspicions that he was involved. But I couldn't understand why. What did Warren gain from framing me? I want to call Grandma Eleanor, I said, reaching for my phone. She would believe me. She had always seen through Tyler. My mother is traveling in Europe, Warren said smoothly. Besides, this is our family matter to resolve. The walls were closing in. Every suggestion I made was blocked, every defense twisted against me. I was being railroaded, and I couldn't stop it. Warren delivered his ultimatum. Here's what's going to happen, Derek. Either you confess, tell us where the bracelet is so we can recover it, or you need to leave this house. You're kicking me out for something I didn't do? My voice cracked with disbelief. You're 17, nearly 18. Old enough to face consequences for your actions. I turned to my mother, who had remained largely silent. Mom? Are you going to let this happen? Her eyes were filled with tears as she looked at me. The mother who had once been my whole world, my fierce protector, now regarded me like a stranger. Derek, just tell us where the bracelet is. Please. The betrayal in that moment was absolute. She believed them over me. After everything we'd been through together, all the years it had been just us against the world, she was choosing Warren and Tyler. I can't tell you where something is when I never took it, I said, my voice hollow. But I'll leave if that's what you want. Warren nodded. You can take what you can carry. The rest we'll donate. Rebecca? Warren prompted when my mother remained silent, her face in her hands. Just go, Derek, she whispered, not looking up. Just go. I packed a backpack with clothes, my laptop, and the few valuables I could fit. As I headed for the door, I took one last look at what had been my home. Tyler watched from the staircase, and for a brief moment, his mask slipped. A small, satisfied smile played at the corners of his mouth. In that instant, I knew with absolute certainty that he had taken the bracelet. And somehow, Warren had helped him frame me for it. What I couldn't understand was why my stepfather would go to such lengths to protect Tyler while destroying me. The door closed behind me, and just like that, I was homeless at 17. That first night of true homelessness remains sharp in my memory. I wandered to the local park and sat on a bench until darkness fell, trying to process what had just happened. The reality of my situation hit as the temperature dropped, and I realized I had nowhere to sleep. I spent that night huddled in the park bathroom, jumping at every sound, too shocked to even cry. Morning brought clarity and the need for action. I called my friend Jason, explaining as much as I could without breaking down. His family had always liked me, and they agreed to let me stay in their basement temporarily. Their kindness was the first ray of light in the darkness. You can stay through graduation, Jason's mom told me. No child should be without a roof over their head. The next few months were a brutal education in self-reliance. I continued attending school, maintaining my grades despite everything. My guidance counselor, Ms. Patterson, became an unexpected ally when I finally broke down in her office after she noticed my declining appearance. I'm homeless, I admitted, the words painful to say aloud. My family thinks I stole something valuable, but I didn't. Ms. Patterson didn't ask for details. Instead, she helped me apply for hardship scholarships and connected me with resources for displaced teens. She let me use her office to study during lunch periods when the library was too crowded. Meanwhile, I attempted to contact my mother multiple times. Every call went straight to voicemail. My text messages showed as delivered but remained unanswered. Eventually, I discovered Warren had changed their home phone number. The message was clear: I was cut off completely. After a month at Jason's, I knew I needed a more permanent solution. I couldn't impose on his family indefinitely. Through a community board at school, I found a room to rent in a house with 3 other roommates for the summer after graduation. It was small and dingy, but it was mine, and I could pay for it with my grocery store job. When my shift manager learned about my situation, he gave me additional hours and sometimes let me take home groceries that would otherwise be thrown out. I learned to cook simple meals on a hot plate, to budget every penny, to wash clothes in the sink when laundromat money was tight. Community college accepted me with a partial scholarship for the fall. It wasn't the university experience I'd planned, but it was education, a path forward. I worked 3 jobs that summer: grocery store in the mornings, restaurant busboy evenings, and weekend lawn mowing, saving every possible dollar for tuition and books. The emotional toll was perhaps the hardest part. I'd have moments of normalcy followed by crushing waves of betrayal and abandonment. How could my mother believe I would steal from her? How could she choose Warren and Tyler over me? These questions haunted my quieter moments. I found a therapist who offered services on a sliding scale for students. Dr. Meyer helped me process my grief and anger in those biweekly sessions. "What you're experiencing is complex trauma," she explained. "You're grieving multiple losses: your home, your mother's trust, your sense of family security. It's natural to cycle through denial, anger, bargaining, and depression." Through therapy, I began to rebuild my sense of self. I wasn't defined by what had happened to me or by my family's betrayal. I was defined by how I responded to adversity. Occasionally, I received updates about my family through my cousin Sophia, who still visited them regularly. She told me my mother seemed depressed but never mentioned me. Tyler had apparently crashed another car but faced no serious consequences. Warren's business was thriving. Life had continued for them without me. My roommate Mike became a close friend during this time. Unlike my family, he valued honesty and straightforwardness. When I finally told him my full story, his response was simple: "Some people don't deserve to be family, man. They're just people who share your DNA." Academic success became my focus and vindication. I maintained a 4.0 GPA at community college, and after my first year, I secured a transfer to State University with an academic scholarship covering most of my tuition. My marketing professor recommended me for an internship that eventually led to a job offer for after graduation. By 20, I had moved into my own studio apartment. It was small but clean, and most importantly, it was mine alone. I furnished it piece by piece from thrift stores and marketplace finds. The day I hung curtains, actual curtains I had chosen and purchased myself, felt like a significant victory. Holidays were the hardest times. Thanksgiving at a friend's house, Christmas in my apartment alone, birthdays marked only by a handful of messages from new friends. I created traditions for myself, building a life around the hole where family should have been. Through it all, I never learned what actually happened to the bracelet. The mystery of why Tyler needed money so desperately, and why Warren would help him frame me, remained unsolved. I had theories but no proof. Eventually, I stopped actively thinking about it, pushing it to the background of my life as I moved forward. Then, nearly 4 years after I'd been cast out, an unexpected letter arrived at my apartment. The envelope stood out immediately, heavy cream stationery with my name and address written in elegant, slightly shaky handwriting. I recognized it instantly as my grandmother Eleanor's penmanship. Inside was a formal invitation to her 100th birthday celebration, to be held at the family estate in 3 weeks. A separate note was folded beneath it. "Dear Derek, I've never believed the stories they told about you. My health is not what it once was, and I would very much like to see you before time runs out for such opportunities. There are matters we should discuss in person. With love, Grandma Eleanor." I sat on my couch, reading and rereading those lines. My hands trembled slightly. After 4 years of nothing, this connection to my past felt surreal. I hadn't seen Eleanor since before the incident. Warren had effectively cut me off from his side of the family, and I had no way to reach her independently. My immediate instinct was to refuse. Why would I subject myself to another encounter with the people who had cast me out? Yet something in Eleanor's note suggested she knew more than she was letting on. And despite everything, I'd always felt a connection with her. I called Dr. Meyer that evening for an emergency therapy session. "What do you want to get from this encounter, if you decide to go?" she asked after I explained the situation. "Closure, maybe? Or—" I hesitated, admitting a truth I'd barely acknowledged to myself. "Part of me wants them to see I survived. That I'm doing well despite what they did. Those are valid feelings." She nodded. "If you do decide to attend, let's discuss some boundaries and coping strategies." Over the next 2 sessions, we prepared for every possible scenario, seeing my mother again, facing Warren and Tyler, managing potential gaslighting or manipulation. Dr. Meyer helped me develop a mental toolkit for maintaining emotional equilibrium in a potentially toxic environment. My decision solidified. I would go, but on my terms. I booked a hotel room nearby rather than staying at the family home. I arranged to arrive shortly before the event and leave immediately after. I would be cordial but distant. A week before the party, I received an unexpected message from Brian, a former classmate who had been at the same school as Tyler. We hadn't been close, but he'd heard I was coming back to town. "There's something you should know," he told me over coffee at a local shop. "About 2 years ago, I was at a party with Tyler. He got really drunk and started bragging about how he'd sold some fancy bracelet to pay for car repairs and pinned it on you. He thought it was hilarious that everyone believed him." My hands froze around my coffee cup. "Did he say anything else? About how he did it?" Brian nodded. "He mentioned something about Warren helping create evidence against you. He was pretty wasted, so details were fuzzy, but he definitely said Warren was in on it." "Would you be willing to write down what you heard? Sign a statement?" Brian agreed, and by the end of that week, I had his notarized account of Tyler's drunken confession. It wasn't definitive proof, but it was something, the first piece of external validation that I wasn't crazy, that what I'd suspected was true. Through further conversations with mutual acquaintances, I pieced together more of the story. Tyler had apparently sold the bracelet to an underground dealer who specialized in moving stolen jewelry, someone who wouldn't ask questions or require ID. He'd used the money to pay for the car repairs before Warren discovered the damage. Warren's motivation remained murky until I spoke with my old neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, who had always been observant about our family dynamics. "Warren was terrified of losing your mother," she told me over the phone. That spring, I overheard them arguing in the backyard. She was threatening to leave him over Tyler's behavior. Said she couldn't keep watching him enable his son's destructive choices. Suddenly, Warren's actions made more sense. If Rebecca had discovered Tyler stole her precious bracelet, it might have been the final straw. By framing me, Warren protected both Tyler and his marriage. Armed with this contextual understanding and Brian's statement, I felt more prepared to face my family. The day before Eleanor's party, I drove back to my hometown for the first time in 4 years. The familiar streets felt both unchanged and utterly foreign. I passed my old high school, the park where I'd spent that first homeless night, the grocery store where I'd worked. Each landmark carried memories, some painful, some formative. I checked into the Holiday Inn rather than the family home, unpacking my carefully selected outfit for the next day. I'd chosen a well-tailored suit, professional but not flashy. Success was the best revenge, and I wanted my appearance to reflect how far I'd come despite their actions. That night, I rehearsed potential conversations in my head. I wouldn't initiate confrontation, but I wouldn't back down either. I would be factual, calm, and dignified. If directly challenged, I had Brian's statement and other evidence I'd gathered. But ideally, I would simply make an appearance for Eleanor's sake, then leave with my dignity intact. Sleep came fitfully as my mind cycled through scenarios of the reunion ahead. By morning, I felt a strange calm. Whatever happened today, I had survived worse. I had rebuilt my life once. I could do it again if needed. As I adjusted my tie in the hotel mirror, I reminded myself I was no longer that helpless 17-year-old boy. I was a man who had faced abandonment and betrayal and emerged stronger. Today wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my narrative. With that resolve, I drove to Eleanor's estate, ready to face the family that had once cast me out. Eleanor's estate looked exactly as I remembered, a stately Victorian home with sweeping gardens and a circular driveway now filled with cars. I parked my modest but well-maintained sedan between a Mercedes and an Audi, took a deep breath, and headed for the front door. The family gathering was already in full swing. A server offered me champagne as I entered the grand foyer where guests mingled in small groups. Several distant relatives did double-takes when they recognized me. "Derek? Is that really you?" My mother's cousin Martha approached first, embracing me awkwardly. "We haven't seen you in years." "I've been away," I replied simply, not elaborating. "How have you been?" Before long, word of my arrival spread through the party. I maintained polite small talk with extended family members, many of whom seemed unaware of exactly why I'd disappeared from family functions. I neither confirmed nor denied any rumors, simply saying I'd been focused on my education and career. Then I saw her, my mother, standing near the buffet table, her conversation with an aunt halting mid-sentence as our eyes met. She looked older, lines of stress etched around her eyes and mouth. For a moment neither of us moved. I nodded politely in her direction but continued my conversation with a second cousin. From my peripheral vision, I saw her whisper something urgently to Warren, who had appeared at her side. His face hardened as he spotted me. Tyler was the last to notice my presence. He nearly dropped his drink when he turned and saw me speaking with his great-aunt Vivian. Unlike my mother's shock or Warren's anger, Tyler's face registered something closer to fear. Before any direct confrontation could occur, a bell rang announcing it was time to greet the guest of honor. Eleanor made her entrance from the main staircase, assisted by a nurse. Despite her advanced age, she maintained an aura of dignity and sharp awareness. Her face lit up when she spotted me in the crowd. "Derek! You came!" She extended both hands toward me as I approached. The room fell silent, watching our reunion. "Happy birthday, Grandma," I said, taking her fragile hands in mine. "You look wonderful." "And you," she said, studying my face intently, "look like a man who has seen both hardship and triumph. I'm so glad you're here." Throughout the formal celebration, the cake, the toasts, the presentation of gifts, I felt Warren watching me like a hawk. My mother seemed unable to look directly at me, while Tyler kept his distance entirely. I maintained my composure, focusing on Eleanor and polite conversation with other guests. After the formal celebration, Eleanor tapped her glass for attention. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate with me today. Before we continue with the festivities, I need a few moments with my immediate family. Derek, Rebecca, Warren, Tyler, please join me in the study." The request caused a ripple of whispers. Warren started to object, but Eleanor silenced him with a sharp look that belied her fragile appearance. "It wasn't a suggestion, Warren." The four of us followed Eleanor to her wood-paneled study, where a stranger in a crisp suit waited by the fireplace. "This is James Cooper." Eleanor introduced him once the door was closed. "A private investigator I hired 4 years ago." "A private investigator? Mother, what is this about?" Warren's voice carried a nervous edge I'd never heard before. Eleanor settled into her high-backed chair like a queen on her throne. "4 years ago, Derek was accused of stealing Rebecca's bracelet, my family heirloom, and subsequently thrown out of his home. I never believed this story, but I was conveniently away in Europe when it happened. By the time I returned, Derek had disappeared." She nodded to Cooper, who opened a leather portfolio. "Mrs. Wilson asked me to investigate what really happened to the bracelet," he explained, removing several photographs. These were taken from security cameras at Clarkson's pawn shop on the day the bracelet disappeared. He laid out several images showing Tyler entering and leaving the establishment. My mother gasped. That's not all. Cooper continued. The owner remembered Tyler clearly because he tried to pawn such a valuable piece without ID. He refused the transaction, but he recalls Tyler mentioning he knew someone who handled special items. Through my investigation, I identified this individual as Marcus Reed, a known fence for stolen jewelry. Cooper placed another photo on the desk, Tyler meeting with a man in a parking lot behind an abandoned building. Additionally, I have statements from 3 of Tyler's friends confirming he crashed his father's car while driving drunk and needed money for repairs. Cooper glanced at me. And most recently, we obtained this sworn statement from Brian Mitchell recounting Tyler's drunken confession about framing Derek. Warren's face had turned ashen. This is circumstantial at best. Tyler may have visited a pawn shop that day, but that doesn't prove. Stop it, Warren. Eleanor cut him off sharply. I've known something was wrong from the beginning. The story never made sense. Derek stealing from Rebecca? The boy who worked part-time jobs since he was 16 to save for college? Who maintained perfect grades while helping around the house? It was absurd on its face. Tyler had remained silent until now, but his composure was cracking. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he looked frantically between his father and grandmother. Tyler, Eleanor addressed him directly, her voice surprisingly gentle. I've lived a century. I've seen how lies fester and poison everything they touch. Whatever you did, the truth will hurt less than continuing this deception. Something in her tone, not accusatory but almost sad, seemed to reach him. Tyler's shoulders slumped, and he sank into a chair. I didn't mean for it to go so far, he whispered, not meeting anyone's eyes. I just needed the money fast, and the bracelet was right there. My mother made a small, pained sound. I took it Sunday while everyone was out. Tyler continued, words tumbling out faster now. I tried the pawn shop first, but they wouldn't take it without ID. So I called this guy Jack knew who buys stolen stuff. He gave me $8,000 for it, way less than it was worth, but I was desperate. Why? My mother asked, her voice barely audible. Why did you need money so badly? Tyler glanced at Warren, who had gone very still. I borrowed Dad's car to go to a party. I was drunk and crashed it into a ditch. The repairs cost $7,500. If you guys found out. He trailed off. So you stole my bracelet. But why frame Derek? My mother's voice had gained strength, edged with growing anger. This time Warren spoke before Tyler could answer. It was my idea, he admitted, his voice flat. Tyler came to me in a panic after he'd already sold the bracelet. He was afraid you'd leave us both if you found out what he'd done. Warren couldn't meet my eyes as he continued. I planted the jewelry box under Derek's bed. The receipt. I created it on my computer and planted it in his jacket. I knew you were already concerned about his increasing independence. It wasn't hard to make you suspicious. The room fell silent as the full weight of their confession settled over us. My mother had gone very pale, one hand pressed against her mouth. You destroyed our family, she finally said, looking between Warren and Tyler. You stole my precious heirloom, framed my son, and made me throw him out, my own child. For what? To cover up a drunk driving accident? Tyler began to sob, genuine remorse seeming to finally break through. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I never thought, I didn't know it would go so far. Warren attempted to regain control of the situation. Rebecca tried to understand. Tyler made a mistake, yes, but he was just a kid. We were protecting our family. No. My mother cut him off, her voice ice cold. You weren't protecting our family. You were protecting yourselves. At Derek's expense. For the first time since entering the room, all eyes turned to me. I had remained silent throughout these revelations, processing each confirmation of what I'd suspected but could never prove. Derek, my mother said, taking a step toward me. I don't expect you to forgive me. What I did, choosing to believe them over you, it's unforgivable. But please know I have regretted it every day since. I maintained my composure, though my heart pounded in my chest. I needed you, I said simply. I was 17 and homeless. I called you dozens of times. I know, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. There's nothing I can say to make that right. Eleanor cleared her throat, drawing everyone's attention back to her. There's more you all need to know, she said firmly. This revelation today isn't just about clearing Derek's name. There are consequences. Eleanor reached for another folder on the desk beside her. In light of Mr. Cooper's findings, I've already taken several actions, she announced, her voice steady despite her age. First, I've modified my will. Warren and Tyler are removed as beneficiaries. Derek and Rebecca will split the estate upon my passing, provided certain conditions are met. Warren's face reddened. Mother, you can't be serious. One mistake. It wasn't one mistake, Eleanor interrupted sharply. It was a calculated series of choices that resulted in a 17-year-old boy being homeless. But that's between you and your conscience. The legal matters are more immediate. She opened the folder. Mr. Cooper has already filed a police report regarding the theft and fraud, complete with all evidence gathered. Additionally, I've initiated a civil lawsuit on Derek's behalf for defamation, emotional damages, and financial harm resulting from his wrongful expulsion from his home. Tyler began to sob harder, while Warren turned ashen. A lawsuit? Criminal charges? Mother, this would destroy us. My business, Tyler's future. You should have considered that before stealing a $25,000 heirloom and framing an innocent teenager, Eleanor replied without sympathy. Actions have consequences, Warren. I've protected you from them for far too long. My mother had collapsed into a chair, her body shaking with silent sobs. I felt strangely detached, as though watching the scene unfold from a distance. Derek, Warren turned to me, desperation clear in his voice. We made a terrible mistake. We're truly sorry. But please, if you press charges, it will ruin us. Tyler could face jail time. My business partners would abandon me. Can't we resolve this privately? We'll pay you back, whatever amount you think is fair. I studied the man who had orchestrated my downfall. For years ago, he had shown no mercy when casting me out. Now he wanted mercy from me. I need time to think, I said finally. This isn't a decision I'll make in the heat of the moment. Eleanor nodded approvingly. Wise. The paperwork is prepared but not yet filed. You have time to consider your options. As we left the study, the contrast between the somber mood of our small group and the continuing celebration outside was jarring. I excused myself, needing air and space to process everything that had happened. In the garden behind the house, I found a quiet bench beneath an old oak tree. A few minutes later, my mother appeared, her eyes red from crying. May I? She asked, gesturing to the space beside me. I nodded, and she sat, maintaining a respectful distance. I failed you, she said simply. As a mother, my job was to protect you, to believe in you. Instead, I let Warren manipulate me into betraying my own son. Why did you believe them? I asked, the question that had haunted me for years finally spoken aloud. She was quiet for a moment. I wish I had a good answer. Warren had been gradually undermining my confidence in you, subtle comments about your attitude, suggestions that you resented him and Tyler. By the time the bracelet disappeared, I was primed to believe you might have done it. But that's an explanation, not an excuse. We sat in silence for several minutes. I've missed you every day, she finally said. I tried to find you after about 6 months. I realized how irrational it all seemed, but you'd disappeared. No one knew where you'd gone. I was homeless, I replied evenly. Then living with friends. Then working 3 jobs to afford a room in a shared house. I changed my phone number after you ignored my calls for weeks. She flinched at the matter-of-fact recounting of my struggle. I don't expect forgiveness, Derek. But I want you to know I'm divorcing Warren. I started the process last month, even before learning the truth today. I just couldn't live with the man he'd revealed himself to be. Over the next few weeks, I consulted with friends, Dr. Meyer, and eventually a lawyer about how to proceed. Tyler and Warren both called repeatedly, their messages growing increasingly desperate as the reality of their situation sank in. They're scared, my lawyer explained. And they should be. The evidence is substantial. Tyler could face charges for grand theft and filing a false police report. Warren could be charged as an accessory. Civilly, you have a strong case for damages. I thought about what justice meant in this situation. Was it seeing them punished? Extracting financial compensation? Or simply having my name cleared and the truth acknowledged? Eleanor provided unexpected guidance during a private lunch at her home. Revenge and justice aren't the same thing, she told me. Revenge is about making yourself feel better. Justice is about setting things right. What would you do? I asked her. She considered this carefully. I would ensure there are consequences significant enough that they never forget what they did, but I wouldn't destroy their lives completely. Redemption should remain possible, even if they don't deserve it. After much reflection, I made my decision. The criminal complaint would proceed. Both Tyler and Warren would face legal consequences for their actions. However, I agreed to a structured settlement for the civil case, requiring them to 1. Pay for completion of my education and reimburse all expenses I incurred during homelessness. 2. Attend mandatory counseling to address the behaviors that led to their actions. 3. Perform substantial community service with organizations supporting homeless youth. 4. Make a public apology acknowledging my innocence. My mother and I began the slow, challenging process of rebuilding some form of relationship. We started with weekly coffee meetings that were initially tense and awkward but gradually became more comfortable. I set clear boundaries about Warren and Tyler. I had no interest in reconciling with them, and she respected that separation. I don't know if I can ever fully trust you again, I told her honestly during one of these meetings. But I'm willing to try building something new. Warren and Tyler pled guilty to reduced charges, avoiding jail time but receiving probation, community service, and in Tyler's case, mandatory rehabilitation. The financial settlement covered not only my educational expenses, but provided compensation for the emotional trauma I'd endured. More meaningful than the money was the public acknowledgement of my innocence. The local paper ran a story about the case, and Warren's business partners distanced themselves from him, eventually forcing him to sell his share of the company. At Eleanor's 101st birthday, a much smaller family gathering, she pulled me aside for a private conversation. I've watched you handle this entire situation with remarkable grace, she told me. You had every right to demand they be punished to the fullest extent, yet you chose a path that allowed for consequences while still leaving room for growth. I learned from your example, I told her honestly. You could have cut them off completely, but you made sure justice was served without being vindictive. She smiled, patting my hand. Family is complicated, Derek. Blood doesn't automatically make someone worthy of your trust or love. Sometimes the family we choose is more real than the family we're born into. Those words resonated deeply. During my years of independence, I had built a network of friends who had supported me unconditionally. Jason's family who took me in when I was homeless, Ms. Patterson who helped me apply for scholarships, Mike who became the brother Tyler never was, Dr. Meyer who guided me through my trauma. They were my chosen family, bound not by DNA but by genuine care and respect. Today, 4 years after that fateful birthday party, my life has found a new equilibrium. I maintain a cordial but distant relationship with my mother, who continues to work on earning back my trust. I have no contact with Warren, who moved to another state after the divorce. Tyler, after completing rehabilitation, occasionally sends letters of apology which I acknowledge but don't respond to. Eleanor, now 104, remains a strong presence in my life, a model of dignity and wisdom. The lawsuit money funded my master's degree, and I now run my own successful marketing consultancy. The bracelet was never recovered, sold and likely dismantled years ago. But its absence no longer represents betrayal and loss. Instead, it stands as a reminder that sometimes losing what you thought was important opens the door to discovering what truly matters. If you've made it to the end of my story, I'm curious to know. Have you ever had to rebuild trust with someone who betrayed you? Was forgiveness possible, or did you find it healthier to move on? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with others who might benefit from hearing that survival and triumph are possible even after the deepest betrayals. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the family we choose becomes our greatest strength.